Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. The affirmation for today is there is a place for me in the learning community. There is a place for me in the learning community. And the reason why we have that affirmation today is because the weekly lesson is talking about government housing. Now, you might not know this, but when you go to the north of England or to Scotland, in the past, these areas were very industrial. So when you go, you'll see traces of industry. They've done very well in tidying the places up. Where there used to be really dark mills, they've managed to convert them into office space or private accommodation. Where there's been steelworks or factories with Victorian buildings, they've managed to convert them into nature spaces. They've managed to turn them into cycle tracks or places of exercise, and in some places they've simply just converted them into shopping malls, and they've built massive supermarkets on top of what used to be a 19th century government industry. So it's all change. Now, I'm telling you all of this because if you read my weekly lesson, you'll discover that the government introduced these large housing estates where people working in these factories could live. And they're still around. Industry's long gone, but yet the housing estates, which are owned by the government, are still there and incredibly functional. Depending on exactly where you are, your local government housing or council estate may have a bad reputation, but many of them are being bought by private landlords and are becoming very beautiful. But for the most part, many of these council estates still are used for accommodation. And the reason for that is because the government owns loads of accommodation in the north. And some towns, if you visit them, you soon discover that the government is the primary landlord. Oh, it's very interesting. Anyway, I'm telling you all of this because today's affirmation is there's a place for me in the learning community. In the old days, to learn, you had to go to school or university, and sometimes you just felt a little bit out of place. An older woman, for example, going to a language school when she's 60 might not feel so comfortable being around 20-year-olds who are looking to emigrate. These days, things are much better because you can simply go online and talk to a teacher. But it's not quite as easy as you might think because online learning is much more informal. It's very chatty. And unless you really know what you want, you soon find yourself in a very basic conversation with a tutor who's asking you if you have a dog. It's kind of hard to get into the depth of language learning online. Structure is something which seems to be disappearing, and the internet is a very relaxed place. So you really need to know what you want or what you're looking for in order to tell the teacher. If you don't do that, the teacher is going to look to hear what he thinks you need, and the two things might not match. When it comes to something like accent reduction, it's much easier because, if you know someone's looking for accent reduction, you can immediately help them with that. But if they come to you saying, well, my English, I don't know, it takes a little bit of time to identify goals. And some people naturally just don't know what they're looking for. So it's really interesting. So, as well as talking about housing today and accommodation, the question is, where do you fit in the learning community? Now, we're going to talk a little bit about accommodation today, as well as referring back to our weekly lesson. I have to say that we had an election last week, as you know, and the winner lives in number 10 Downing Street. That's the official residence of the Prime Minister. Now, when I was a little boy, you could go to Downing Street, knock on the door, ask them a question, and they would entertain you. They would give you some sweets. They would try to convince you of their politics. They would take you inside and someone would talk to you. Well, of course, that's all gone now, and politicians don't make it easy to get close to them. Downing Street's inaccessible, and the best chance you have is sending an email, and even then, it's a little bit frightening because everyone is so guarded about opinions. You might think that the man lives inside number 10 Downing Street, but actually he lives at number 11. The official residence of our Prime Minister is on the very top of number 10. Yeah, he has a private apartment on the very top of that building. It is actually much bigger than it looks. But because the one at number 11 is bigger, most of them live in the apartment above number 11 Downing Street. And number 11 Downing Street is the office and residence of the man who looks after the finances of the government, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So if the Prime Minister has a family, then he usually lives in the little apartment above number 11 instead of the one above number 10. That's usually where they take up their residence, but officially it's 10 Downing Street, and the rest of the building is the administration of the government. It's very interesting, isn't it? And yeah, I'm sure you've seen pictures of it, and I've done podcasts about that before, if you're very interested. Other things you might need to know if you're coming to London to live or to study, and that is that rent is really, really crazy, especially in the south. There's a news report today about rent inside and outside of London, and we're going to read through it. So this is from the Daily Express, and it says, average rent outside of London is now £1,300 per month. That's not, strictly speaking, true. I would say in the London area, outside of London, that's probably true. But the further north you go, it gets cheaper. So I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I'm paying a quarter of that in the north. So again, we must remember that when it talks about England or London or whatever else, it's not reflecting the 4 nations around the UK. But if you live in the south, in the London area, yeah, it's crazy. It really is. So let's read through this article. It says, the average monthly rent being asked outside London has hit a high of £1,316, according to a property website. It means they are around 7% higher than the year before. And this analysis was done by a company called Rightmove. It says here, in London, the average rent is £2,652 per month, which is 4% more than outside London. It says here that According to Rightmove, they are recommending that the next government should accelerate house building and offer incentives to landlords to invest in more homes for tenants to improve the supply and demand in the rental market and in order to give it some stability. Oh, very interesting. So they've issued a statement to say the next government should be prioritising an improvement in the planning process, an acceleration of house building, and encouraging more supply into the rental market, because they know that people aren't able to buy property in the south. If you've just left university, property is so expensive, you have no choice except to rent. As I've been saying in my weekly lesson, it's very different in the north because there's a lot of government accommodation, and it's kind of expected that that would be used to avoid any homelessness or any problems with this kind of thing. But in the south, government accommodation is considered inappropriate because young people want to buy a place. You know, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, buying property was considered something which was only for the rich or well educated. But now we all have a basic standard of living. Young people clearly think that they have a right to be buying, but I don't think they realize that to have that right, you need to be earning a lot of money. So it doesn't always work, perhaps the way that they're thinking. My parents' generation and even my generation really struggled to buy property as well. So, I mean, I didn't buy property. I simply rent because I wanted the freedom to travel to other countries. When we were in the European Union, it was great just to decide to go and work in Spain or across Europe for a few months. And of course, we no longer have those privileges. So people now are kind of looking around and saying, well, if I have to stay here, what can I buy? Or what kind of investment can I have? Which is perfectly fine, but it comes with a great cost. What I don't like about this article, though, is once again, as usual, we're looking to the government and we're saying, oh, yeah, the government should be prioritizing an improvement plan. Yeah, well, the more power we surrender to the government, the more choices we are losing as individuals. We're getting to a point where the government soon is going to be regulating everything. Sometimes it's better just to try to deal with these things ourselves, you know, and live according to our means by not overspending in these things. But yeah, now the standard of living is kind of demanding that people make change, but also everyone in their own minds knows what they want according to the media that they've been watching. So things are really changing. So that's the question for today. Where do you belong in the learning community? The good thing about the internet is there's a place for absolutely everyone. So if you are older, you have special needs, there's no reason to be afraid going into learning, but you really must be aware of what your expectations are. If you're looking for something which resembles a school, but an online version, they do exist, but generally, internet learning is more relaxed. You get a one-to-one tutor, and you really need to tell them what you want or what your expectations are. And you also need to come at this with an open mind, because it's a little bit harder and more difficult to establish what you need, especially if you've been going to a school and that school is saying, okay, I'm going to get you to C1 level in 3 months. In general, one-to-one teachers, we can do that. We can help you with that. But because there's only 2 of us in the class, it involves a lot of work. And if you're having a weekly lesson, you're working or doing other things, it's much harder to help you reach that goal. What usually happens is internet teachers are more affirmers. We affirm what you're looking for. We help you reach that. We hold you accountable. It's more kind of like coaching. So the more you know about what you need, the more money you can save. If you just come to a teacher and say, yeah, I want English, some teachers will just let you spend as much money as you want without identifying your goals. These are just a few things to be aware of. Anyway, that's it for today. So remember, where do you belong in the learning community? The more honest and transparent you can be with the teacher will help you to understand exactly where you are and where you're going. That's it. Let's talk soon. See you. Bye.